League of Legends is a highly complicated game with lots of different aspects you need to master if you want to get good. If you are a beginner or only just discovered the game but also enjoy winning more than losing, this video will help you to understand the fundamentals and enable you to see the concepts behind the best League of Legends strategies. You will learn how to make your own decisions in your games so you always have the highest chance to win no matter what your teammates are doing. In order to get to that secret source of success though, we must first start with the basics. League of Legends is played in a 5 vs 5 format, which means you team up with 4 random allies against 5 random enemies. There are also other less competitive game modes, but the ranked mode is always played in the aforementioned format. Therefore, I highly suggest that you play blind pick mode when you are brand new, transitioning to draft pick as soon as you have enough champions, and finally to solo queue when your account eventually hits level 30. Before the match begins, you pick your champion of course, but you also need to select your summoner spells and your rune page. I will tell you more about optimal summoner spells later, but we must first discuss the map and why the metagame developed how it did, because then you will also easily understand the thought process behind your summoner spell selection. Very briefly, summoner spells are essentially 2 additional active abilities you can use throughout the match, and everyone picks Flash because Flash is broken. As far as runes are concerned, they passively empower your champion by enhancing your stats or by giving your champion extra passive abilities. Some runes will of course synergize with your champion better than others, and trying to optimize your rune page is certainly a challenging task. Fortunately, there are preset rune pages in the game that are at least decent for their assigned champions, so new players can straightforwardly select these and are good to go. So you simply pick a champion you think looks cool and jump into the match with your preset rune page and 2 summoner spells. At the start of the game, each team spawns in their respective base fountain behind their nexus. Your base is connected to the enemy's base by 3 lanes: the bot lane, the mid lane, and the top lane. The optimal strategy to play the game is for one player to go to the top lane, sending another player to the mid lane, and having 2 players in the bot lane. One player in your team does not go to one of the lanes at all, but instead is delegated to prowling the jungle area. I will tell you why that strategy is optimal in just a second, but first you must talk about towers or it won't make sense. Both teams have 3 towers on each lane and 1 so-called inhibitor at the intersections of their base and their respective lanes. The nexus is protected by 2 additional towers and is the most important structure on the entire map, because if you manage to destroy the enemy's nexus, your team wins the game. Now, with only that single piece of information, the logical thing to do would be to straight up run at the opposing nexus and start tearing it down right away. But this will never work because the nexus is in fact untargetable unless both its protecting towers and at least 1 inhibitor are destroyed. Actually, every structure on the map is untargetable as long as there's another structure in front of it. Only once the most outer tower in a lane is destroyed, the next one becomes targetable. This means you must work your way through one of the lanes to ultimately destroy an inhibitor, which then allows you to target the nexus towers and ultimately the nexus itself. You must always attack a structure by right-clicking it, as spells won't work against them. However, towers can and will attack you right back instantly when you come too close. They deal tons of damage and they have lots of resistances, so you will pretty much always lose this 1 vs 1 exchange. In order to take down an enemy tower efficiently, you need help from your minions. The Nexus sends 6 minions to each lane every 30 seconds, with every 3rd wave having an additional extra strong siege minion. As the game progresses, siege minions will start spawning more often, and ultimately every wave will contain a siege minion, making it much easier to take down towers. Minions will always fight the first enemy unit they encounter, no matter if it's a champion, a structure, or the opposing minion wave. In a similar fashion, towers will start attacking immediately as soon as an enemy unit walks into their attack range. Towers will prioritize attacking minions before they attack champions. Therefore, the best strategy to destroy enemy towers is to kill the enemy minions so your own minions walk towards the tower. As the tower is striking down your minions one by one, you have plenty of time to chip away at its health bar. Additionally, an enemy tower loses its resistances when it is attacked by minions, which means you deal much more damage to it than usual. Once you destroyed 3 towers in one lane, you can attack the inhibitor in that lane, which unlike towers cannot attack you back, by the way. Inhibitors cannot be destroyed permanently and will always respawn after exactly 5 minutes. During that downtime, however, your Nexus will start sending super minions to the respective lane with every single minion wave. Super minions are extremely overpowered and are strong enough to destroy your opponent's Nexus towers all by themselves. Hence, the enemy team must react and spend valuable time to clear them, which means they are likely not able to contest you as you start destroying even more towers in another lane. What's more, if you manage to destroy all 3 inhibitors, your team will get not only 1 but 2 super minions in every single lane, making it effectively impossible for your enemies to defend their nexus. Therefore, you have to destroy as many towers and inhibitors as you can in order to swarm the enemy nexus with super minions and win the game. The obvious problem here is that your enemy will try to do the same thing to your towers. And even if you manage to quickly kill all the opposing minions and push your minion wave into them, attacking an enemy tower is super dangerous when an enemy champion is protecting it. The opposing player can simply start hitting you, and if you dare to even slightly hit them back, the tower will instantly ignore all the minions and instead attack you right away. By the way, you should also not underestimate the combat power of minions themselves. Just like towers, you will draw aggro from nearby opposing minions if you start attacking an enemy champion. They might not deal much damage individually, but they have strength in numbers. So be careful to avoid death by 1000 cuts, and also keep in mind that a big allied minion wave can protect you against enemy champions very effectively, as your minions will fight by your side. Anyway, now that we know attacking an opposing player under their tower is not an option, there is only one solution left if you want to make any progress. You must remove your lane opponent. The most straightforward way of doing this is, of course, to kill them. When a champion's health bar gets reduced to 0, the champion dies and is removed from the map for several seconds, and during that time they of course cannot protect their tower. After this timeout, the player respawns in the respective base fountain and can start playing again. Dying leaves you unable to help your team or defend your towers, so you have to avoid it at all costs. Therefore, when you took an unfavorable exchange of blows with your enemy and end up low on health, you should retreat behind your tower and press the B button. This causes your champion to start channeling the recall spell, which brings you right back to your base fountain if you completed the channel. Here your health and mana are regenerated rapidly, which means you can go back to lane without needing to sit through the death penalty timer. The recall channel takes 8 seconds to complete and is interrupted when you take damage, so you have to do it behind your tower to prevent your lane opponent from knocking you out of it. There is also another reason why you shouldn't allow your opponent to kill you, but more on that later. Obviously though, it would be better if you are the one who is forcing the enemy to recall, since even without the death timer, this is still an opportunity for you to chip away at their tower while they cannot protect it. Therefore, winning a fight is always good, no matter if the fight resulted in a kill or just forced the enemy to back off. You have to use your champion's basic attacks on your right mouse button and your champion's unique abilities efficiently if you want to come out on top in these player versus player combat situations. Knowledge is king in League of Legends, and therefore you should make yourself familiar with the champion you want to play and at least have a rough understanding of your opponent's champion's abilities. And it is at this point where we can finally start talking about the idea behind the aforementioned 1-1-2 jungle strategy. Because if knowledge is king in League of Legends, then the queen is resources. This sentence is definitely an understatement, by the way, and I will tell you why during later parts of this video, but first let me elaborate on the resources. There are two major resources in the game that make your champion substantially stronger, namely gold and experience. The core principles here are very simple. Whenever an enemy dies near you, your champion will gain experience, and when you are the one dealing the killing blow to the opponent, you will also get gold. Distributing your teammates evenly to all the lanes and the jungle allows your team to get the kill gold and the experience from all the lane minions and from the neutral jungle monsters. You essentially ensure your team gets as much of both resources as possible, which means you will always have the upper hand against opponents who fail to collect these resources. I will now tell you everything you need to know about gold and experience, and afterwards you will understand exactly why certain champions are better suited for the solo lanes, some for the duo lane and others for the jungle, and why it is specifically the bot lane where you want to have 2 players instead of 1. First of all, getting enough experience will cause your champion to level up, passively increasing important combat stats such as attack damage, health and armor. Additionally, you get a skill point with each level up, which you can spend in order to either unlock a new ability or to permanently empower one of the abilities you've already learned. Every champion has 3 basic abilities, 1 ultimate ability and 1 passive ability. Your ultimate ability is usually very strong and pretty much defines the champion, and you need to be at least level 6 before the game allows you to unlock it with a skill point. Your passive ability is simply always there from the beginning of the match, and you do not need to spend any of your precious skill points on it. Each player starts the match at level 1 with 1 skill point that you can spend on any of your 3 basic non-ultimate abilities. The maximum champion level is level 18, which means you eventually end up with 5 skill points in each basic ability and 3 in your ultimate as the game progresses. You pretty much always want to put a point into your ultimate whenever you can, namely at the levels 6, 11 and 16. However, which of your 3 basic abilities should be maxed out first depends heavily on the champion you are playing and on your personal preferences. The other resource, gold, allows you to buy items in the shop, which is located in your respective base fountain. Each player has 500 gold at the start of the game and passively gains 2 gold per second for free. This passive gold generation starts at 1 minute and 50 seconds into the match to ensure each player gets to spend exactly the same amount of gold before they go to their lanes. Always keep in mind that gold by itself is never worth anything in League of Legends. Having gold in your inventory doesn't make you stronger at all. You first need to get back to your base and spend the gold on items. Items are everything in League of Legends since they give you a lot of combat stats and sometimes even new abilities. Therefore, it is extremely important that you end up buying the correct items for your champion, but even if you're a brand new player, you don't need to worry. During a match, the game will recommend items to you that synergize with your champion well, so you don't actually need to understand all the intricacies right away. The only things you need to know is that you can't have more than 6 items at any given time, that the big and expensive items are built out of smaller component items and can be crafted and completed as the game progresses, and that boots are overpowered. Moreover, there are items that are designed to be purchased at the start of the game, namely the Doran's items, the jungle items, the support items, and potions. Jungle items are only for the delegated jungler on your team and help them to fight the neutral monsters. You can only buy them if you chose the summoner spell Smite in the pre-game lobby. In a similar fashion, support items are for the players who choose to play in the support position, but before we dive into that topic, we need to demystify the very iconic items of Doran's Blade, Doran's Shield, and Doran's Ring. The Doran's items are extremely powerful because they give a lot of valuable combat stats for very little gold. They are balanced, however, because they are standalone items that cannot be upgraded. This means Doran's items are highly gold efficient, but at the same time very slot inefficient. In the early game you only have 500 gold anyway, so blocking one of your item slots is no concern and you can enjoy the enormous power of your Doran's item without any drawbacks. In longer games in which you get enough gold to buy multiple expensive items, slot efficiency will get more and more important and you will eventually need to sell your Doran's item to make room for something bigger. If every match was guaranteed to reach the late game before any of the teams get too far ahead, no one would buy Doran's items and instead start to build towards the powerful, expensive items right away. However, the early game is the most important aspect of League of Legends because every single kill your team gets will start a snowball effect. A dead player needs to wait until they respawn in their base, which means they will miss out on gold and experience from minions while at the same time rewarding a 300 gold bounty to the player who scored the kill. An additional 150 gold is distributed between the players who assisted in the kill. This is the second big reason why you should avoid dying. Not only would you need to wait out the death timer, but you are also giving your opponents your kill bounty, enabling them to get their items much earlier and making it even harder for you to fight them going forward. You cannot defend your towers while you're dead, and you can also not guard your team's side of the jungle, which enables the other team to farm your neutral monsters. Because of these snowball mechanics, most matches will roughly end when you are about to complete your third full item, which means sacrificing one item slot to a Doran's item has higher expected value than starting the match with a regular component item. You also always want to buy some potions for the early game because even though you delay your completed item power spikes, the extra health makes it more likely that you win early skirmishes and get the snowball rolling in your team's favor. I saved the most important items for last though, but this is going to be a deep topic, and before we dive into that, you have probably spotted a flaw in the 1-1-2 jungle strategy that we need to talk about. You've just learned how important items are, and you also know that you need to kill minions in order to get the necessary gold. The top lane player kills the top lane minions, the mid lane player kills the mid lane minions, and the jungler kills the jungle minions. But what happens in the bot lane? Does one player farm the minions and the other one just starves? Well, yes, that's exactly what's happening. The two players in the bot lane actually have very different purposes. One of them picks a champion that is weak early on but will scale into the late game with items harder than most other champions. When you give such a champion enough items, they will be pretty much unstoppable in the late game and carry your team to victory. Fittingly, this role is called AD carry position because these champions are typically marksmen who deal most of their damage with their ranged basic attacks. Champions like these are preferred over mages in that position because when you have two people in one lane, you run into another problem concerning resources. Yes, you are able to funnel all the gold into the AD carry by letting them kill all the minions, but the experience is distributed among all nearby allied players no matter who deals the killing blows. Therefore, you will level up much slower in a duo lane than in a solo lane. A mage being underleveled is a huge problem because mages heavily rely on getting skill points as fast as possible to upgrade their spells. AD carries don't care nearly as much about being underleveled since their main damage comes from their basic attacks instead of abilities. They typically take the summoner spells Heal and Flash or Exhaust and Flash so they can stay as safe as possible. The other player in the bot lane is playing the support position and they are the exact opposite of AD carries. Supports are typically very strong during the early game because their abilities either have high utility or high base damage. Due to that, these champions can still function well despite not getting any gold from minions and inferentially completing their items comparatively late. In order to help support champions with their income, there are the aforementioned support starting items in the game. They increase your passive gold generation by 10% and also come with a support quest passive that generates additional gold while you complete it. This makes these items incredibly powerful, and the reason why not everyone is starting the game with a support item is that having such an item will decrease the amount of gold you get from killing minions. With that mechanic, the game makes sure that none of the farming positions can get an unfair gold advantage. As the name implies, support champions are there to protect their AD carry during the early game, since AD carries are most vulnerable when they don't have their items yet. The strong support champion can keep enemies in check and ensure that the AD carry can farm their minions safely. Once the outer towers start to fall and the early game is over, support champions do not need to look after the AD carry anymore and should instead assist their team with their utility spells wherever they are needed. These champions typically pick the summoner spells Ignite and Flash to have as much kill pressure in their lane as possible. Keep in mind though that there are many different subtypes of support champions, and some synergize better with other summoner spells. Ignite plus Flash is just a rough guideline here in case you're lost. The mid lane is where most mage champions should go. As mentioned before, these champions need their solo experience to rank up their abilities as fast as possible. There are two reasons why they prefer to go to the mid lane instead of the top lane, however. The first one is basic geometry. The mid lane is much shorter than the side lanes, so even when you are standing relatively far away from your tower to get your minion kills, the mage can walk back to safety rather quickly. Most mages are not very durable and don't have any mobility spells, so being in a shorter lane is their only safeguard. What mages do have, however, is spells that restrict the opponent's movement by stunning or snaring them. Therefore, they are very valuable fighters in early to mid-game skirmishes, and consequentially the second reason why they prefer the mid lane is that this central position allows them to roam to either side of the map and turn fights around with their damage and crowd control. Mages are strongest during the mid game when they completed their most important item and maxed out their main damage spell. They tend to fall off in the late game because they will always need to wait for their spells to come off cooldown again, whereas a 6-item AD carry can simply keep firing deadly basic attacks with almost no inhibitions. Mages typically get Ignite and Flash to enhance their early all-in power with their spells, but some of them go for a more defensive setup like Barrier and Flash. In the top lane you play tank or bruiser type champions because they can sponge a few hits in bad situations without dying right away, which means being in a long side lane all by themselves doesn't punish them too hard. Alternatively, you can play champions with lots of movement speed or quick dashes in that lane, since they are also well equipped to deal with the dangers of farming in the long top lane. Top lane champions commonly pick Teleport and Flash for the summoner spells so they can quickly join important fights in the bot lane, but some of them are more concerned with simply beating their counterpart and pick Ignite and Flash. The jungle role is extremely diverse in terms of playstyles because the only criterion of how good a jungler any champion is how fast and reliably they can kill the neutral monsters. The more quickly you can clear your jungle camps, the more time you have to disrupt your opponents. You do this by either going to one of the lanes when your enemy least expects it so you can kill them with your allied laner, or by invading the enemy jungle territory to steal their valuable jungle monsters from them. Junglers take the summoner spells Smite and Flash so they can buy a jungling item at the start of the game. Further, Smite will help you to clear the jungle faster and healthier, but the spell also has another important purpose. In the river between the two jungle areas are the Baron Pit close to top lane and the Dragon Pit close to bottom lane. Killing either of these powerful monsters grants enormous buffs to your team, but only the team who lands the killing blow on the monster will get the buff. Smite deals a lot of damage to monsters, so the jungler can use it to secure the last hit on the monster and prevent the enemy from stealing it. Therefore, the best strategy to take these buffs is to first kill the enemy jungler and then start fighting the monster, so the enemy team cannot sneakily last hit the monster with their smite. I will explain the intricacies of the jungle more in depth in another video, so click the subscribe button to stay up to date. The dragon spawns as early as 5 minutes into the game, whereas the first monster in the Baron Pit only spawns after 8 minutes. This is the biggest reason why you want to have 2 players in the bot lane and 1 player in the top lane instead of the other way around, so you have as many allies as possible who can quickly help to contest the first dragon. Naturally, the players in the lanes need to keep the opposing jungler in mind at all times, because the worst thing that can happen is to engage in a fight with your lane opponent only to have the enemy jungler come out of nowhere and kill you. But there is a way for the lane players to protect themselves, and now it is the perfect time to address the overpowered items I wanted to save for last. Wards and trinkets. Remember when I said earlier that knowledge is king in League of Legends? The truth is, having more items than your opponents might be nice, but item advantage is actually not the deciding factor when it comes to winning or losing fights. The real deal is numbers advantage. In your average game of League of Legends, a 3 vs 2 skirmish or a 5 vs 4 teamfight will always be won by the team that has more players in the situation. League of Legends is not a game like chess in which each player has perfect information. Large parts of the map are invisible, and you can only see what is happening in a certain area if an allied unit is currently located there. It doesn't matter if it's a champion, a minion or a tower, all allied units are sources of vision. Enemy laners need to stay close to your minions to kill them, which allows you to see them on the map. The junglers, however, are obscured from their opponent's view because they are not an eye shot of the lane minions. This means the enemy jungler could always be right around the corner, and only if you have enough vision will you be able to accurately estimate how many enemy champions are actually nearby. When you don't see all 5 enemy champions on the map, you have to assume they are coming for you and try to force you into a fight with numbers disadvantage, which you will inevitably lose. Due to that, it is crucial that you briefly look at your minimap in the bottom right corner as frequently as possible so you can acquire enough knowledge about your allies and your enemies' locations. Only with that knowledge will you be able to correctly decide whether you should strike or retreat. Obviously, looking at your map is less effective when the most important areas are simply dark. This is where wards come into play. The yellow and blue trinkets you can get from the shop enable you to place a small allied unit on the map whose sole purpose is to provide vision. Putting these into adjacent jungle areas allows you to spot enemy champions early so you can retreat before they get close enough to hit you. The yellow wards also turn invisible after you place them, so your opponent cannot simply destroy them. On top of that, the support champion gets access to 3 additional stealth wards upon completing the quest on their support item, which means they have a lot of impact on their team's vision. However, there is also the red trinket and the control ward. The red trinket allows you to detect and disable nearby enemy wards for a few seconds when you activate it, so you can attack and destroy them. The control ward can be placed down like any other ward, but it will not turn invisible, which means enemies can attack it freely. Hence, you should only place them in areas which you can actually defend and control. The big selling point of this 75 gold item is that it also detects and disables enemy stealth wards within its radius. A disabled ward does not provide any vision unless it is being attacked. If you need to make absolutely sure the enemy cannot see a certain part of the map, control wards are your friends. When talking about vision, we also need to talk about bushes. Bushes are these weird grassy patches on the map, and they are pretty much the opposite of wards. While wards reveal parts of the map, bushes obscure the map. You cannot see anything that is happening in a bush unless an allied unit is in that bush. Therefore, placing wards directly into bushes is generally speaking a strong move, as you essentially kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Bushes also play a major role when fighting, as they allow a player to repeatedly walk in and out of the enemy's vision and thereby to disrupt their attacking patterns. You need to either move into the bush with them or reveal the bush with a ward to counter this strategy. However, the impact of little tricks like these pales in comparison to item advantage, and the impact of item advantage pales in comparison to numbers advantage. Knowledge is everything in League of Legends, and no matter whether you are playing in the top lane, the mid lane, the bottom lane or the jungle, it is always everyone's job to provide as much vision as possible. It is the only way you can reliably avoid fights with numbers disadvantage, and if there is just one thing you take away from this video, it should be exactly this. Anyway, since you know about all the basics now, you should be ready to take your game to the next level by clicking the link on your screen right there.